Hello. What's happening?
Hello, man.
Juliano, Neve, you're on mute. I'm going to unmute you. Madness. What's happening, Ian?
Hi. All good.
Hello.
Are we excited for this?
What are we covering tonight?
Hypertrophy principles.
Ooh,
Okay.
How to get fucking massive or how to get stronger as well as massive. It'll tie in with the program that you guys done. But I'll talk about that whenever we have a couple more people on. 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba. You right, Joe?
Yes, BJ, what's happening?
Oh, good. I was saying to Alpha the other day, it feels like I haven't seen any of yous in like so long.
I know it's been ages.
How's everybody keeping anyway? So,
All right.
listen,
Okay.
the good thing is we're allowed in small groups, so that means I'll be doing some outdoor training with clients.
Yeah.
So we're getting closer. We're getting closer. Gareth having difficulties. Cool. Marty, what's happening?
What's happening? All good?
All good, all good. How are you keeping?
Oh, Jesus, I'm only awake. I've dozed off for a bit.
Were you training earlier?
Nah, I haven't done a session today yet. To be honest, I don't know. I was on a call there this morning with Irish Boxing. I done a presentation for them, so I was working flat out with that, and then it's had me in the mood to train. But if it stays dry, I'll do the session after this. If not, I don't mind just catching up tomorrow.
I'm telling Lenny.
I'll do two on Monday tomorrow.
Not nice. Not nice. Oh, your mic's broken, Neve. Sorry. Sort that shit out then. I don't know. Find a way. Are we waiting on much more? Is there anybody else coming? We'll get started anyway. So tonight, folks, we're covering hypertrophy principles. Basically, the science and theory behind, if you want to say hypertrophy or hypertrophy, in terms of muscle building. Obviously, breaking through the physiological responses, what needs to happen, and also maybe get rid of some myths as well, because a lot of people attribute hypertrophy to just bodybuilders and stuff as well, but it's widely used in S&C. And it's just about piecing those things together. And pretty much how this material came about was we were getting a lot of, big bodybuilding dudes coming through Elite who were injecting some stuff into themselves openly, and they actually didn't know how to train. They were just lifting heavy shit, taking gear, without any sort of thought process about what they're doing. And there's times whenever we put them through a session, or if I've even trained with them and then I'm doing certain things and they're like, "Fuck, why are you doing that?" Or, "Oh, I've never done that before." And it's actually thinking about what your session is, what you want to achieve from it, rather than just going in and just going, "I'll just keep lifting heavier and doing X, Y, and Z." And so, like I said, we decided to try and educate the meatheads a little bit more. So this actually turned into a workshop, which we sold to people. And it was a 2-day workshop. Went through the theory and science behind hypertrophy, and then went through the practical elements of getting the most out of muscles, and then going on to basic sort of muscle functions and joint functions, which means that we can then look at why certain exercises are good for certain body parts in terms of developing them, and how to get the most out of it, essentially. So I'm going to share this with you here. And we'll just get into it. So if you do have any questions, obviously just pop it in the chat box. So obviously this came from it. So why do we need to know these principles? Pretty much, the difference between theory and practice. There's a lot of misinformation out there, misapplied information, but also the fact that people who are in the trenches, people who are actually training, people who are experimenting, people who are figuring stuff out in the gym or, in their sport, are usually ahead of science. Okay, so what that means is, it's only been the last 10, 15 years that we've, finally proven that the pump that Arnie was chasing in the 60s and the 70s is actually a legitimate way to build muscle tissue. Now, science has just caught up with that, but everyone sort of knew that it worked. Do you know what I mean? So it's knowing the theory, and then also I encourage people to just practice. Just go try and figure stuff out, see what feels good, and then look for the science behind it as well. And the perfect example, I said to the other group the other day, was there was a couple of different gyms I would have trained at, and one in particular I was at one day, and I always used to borrow like bands and chains, and I would just be setting things up, maybe trying to use the bands for accommodated resistance, using the chains in terms of manipulating strength curves and stuff like that. And the little dude on reception was like, I love watching you train. Like you just do something different all the time. And pretty much, I didn't have a training program at the time either, but I was just experimenting. I was experimenting to see what felt good, what didn't feel good. Jesus, see that banded shoulder press? Oh my God, that was phenomenal. Like I can use that. Or, nah, that was shit. I don't know where that would be. Or that exercise is good. This makes it better. And this is going to be perfect for ABC clan. Okay. So like I said, sometimes getting in the trenches, trying to figure shit out is super important, because that's what we do as coaches. We're on the gym floor. And I always ask the question of, who would you want training you? A sports scientist or a trainer with 10 years experience on the gym floor? He's going to answer that, by the way.
10 years experience on the gym floor.
I think
Yeah,
we would all,
same.
yeah, I think we'd all agree that. But if you have someone with 10 years experience and the background, the scientific knowledge that you get from a sports science degree or, an S&C, now you've got a fucking great coach. And that's sometimes the missing component for us as meatheads coming in and just, knowing how to move and stuff like that. It's a bit like we go in blind and then we figure shit out when we're in the dirt and we're in the trenches, right? So, and then we will go, do you know what, I'm doing supersets, giant sets, failure sets. You don't know why you're doing them. You just know that it gives you a pump. You can really burn people out. but it's then when you come back after a while, you learn the science and you're like, that's why that works. So sometimes it's just making sure that we have both those sort of sides blended together as well. So what hypertrophy is not. So again, you've got obviously someone like Phil Heath, bodybuilder, physique competitors, and like we spoke about before, the Belgian blue cow that has a genetic defect, a myostatin gene defect. And the reason why I say it's not that is because, like we're going to talk about here, and 2 slides, hypertrophy is used in everything across the board, from bodybuilders, powerlifters, strength athletes, athletes of any sort of sporting, because it's usually a transition, if you make it very, very simple, of going from muscular endurance into hypertrophy into strength. Okay, and there's always research to say what the optimal amount of strength is for certain sports. If you're an endurance-based sport, obviously you're going to be doing higher reps and stuff like that, and probably a little bit more volume. Sometimes you may dip into, you know, hypertrophy-based movements or even strength-based movements, but it's always there. So it's not always attributed to getting absolutely massive, because if we're doing, you know, between 6 to 12 reps of things with athletes who have to make weight, the last thing you want to do is start piling on slabs of muscle onto someone who's going to need to lose it, you know, if they're going to go and compete in competition. Okay. So something I just wanted to go through here, science versus pseudoscience. We have a lot of bro science from, you know, the big dudes in the gym who are just like, do this, do that. And it's usually what they've done and what's worked for them, with no sort of recollection of how it worked for them or the processes behind it. It's just like, oh no, all I've done is, you know, drink 4 liters of milk every day for 14 years. And then someone starts doing that and gets lactose intolerant, or it just doesn't work, or a certain exercise doesn't work for them. So going through pseudoscience, basically bullshit, what usually happens is people start with a conclusion, and then they work their way backwards. These people are usually bought into one way or one process, and you see it on the internet every single day. Somebody's like, no, the paleo diet is the best diet, you know, you gotta be vegan, and people are bought into it. And when someone criticizes that, they're like, oh, right, hold on, no, and they fight their corner. Okay, so every smart scientist or every smart practitioner will know, I'm not gonna say don't have certain beliefs. We will, like I've had my own beliefs over the years. And when something changes, every good scientist will put their hands up and go, do you know what? I was wrong. I did it this way, but I was still trying to do the same thing. The same thing of trying to get my clients the best results or trying to get myself the best results. But if there's something better comes along, I'm happy to look at it. I'm happy to try it. Okay. Vague jargon to confuse and evade. So obviously, they really don't know what they're talking about at times. Grandiose claims to go beyond the evidence. You see that in marketing every day. Cherry picks only favorable evidence. That's every keyboard warrior on the internet. They see a PubMed study. They don't understand how to read studies. And next minute they're like, taking raspberry ketones up your arse, you know, increases your muscle density by 400%. Right? And then they look in and read it, and it was done on rats. Shit like that. Do you know what I mean? So a lot of time people will cherry pick information to suit what they want. And we all have that cognitive bias. Use flawed methods with unrepeatable results. No mavericks, work in isolation. Use inconsistent, invalid logic. Dogmatic and unyielding. So when we go to the scientific side, we follow the evidence wherever it leads. Embraces criticism. So if there's holes in it, okay, listen, still need to look into this. I'm going to try it, see what I can come up with. Precise terminology. Claims are conservative and tentative. Properly considered all evidence and arguments. Uses rigorous and repeatable methods. Follows careful and valid logic. Changes with new evidence. So I think everyone will be familiar, if you've done science when you were in school, you always had to write down, the method. Make sure that method was repeatable. So that you got consistent results. Okay, so again, that's what we're looking at as well. And like we said before, we have various different athletes. On our top left, we have more of our physique bodybuilders. You have Jessica Ennis, who is a heptathlete, 8 different sports. And then you have the famous German cyclist who had these insane quads, used to squat like 200 kilos for like 10, 15 reps, but he was a sprinter. Johan Blake, who was one of the best sprinters in the world, and then obviously someone maybe closely related to CrossFit and stuff as well. So hypertrophy is used across all these different disciplines, and you can see it, and we're going to talk about that. So what is it? What is hypertrophy or hypertrophy, whatever you want to call it? It basically is an increase in the muscle size and cross-sectional area. Okay, so it's a swelling or an increase in density, okay, across a cross-sectional area. So thickness, density, size. As you can see, I'm going to bring this down to the bottom here. So the definition, the enlargement of an organ or tissue from the increase in size of its cells. Okay, so that's the definition based on Collins English Dictionary. There's two forms of hypertrophy that, again, have never been proven, but are just basically widely accepted. We have sarcomere and we have sarcoplasmic. Sarcomere is the increase in muscle myofibrils within the muscle. Okay, these little, I don't know if you can see it, the wee round circular things that are in there, the one that's just pulled out, they're going to increase a lot more muscle density. Okay, they're going to give more of a hardening of the muscle. And then we've got the sarcoplasmic, which is the cell swelling, the buildup of fluid, the increase in size that you usually see when you get a pump on. Okay, so two different responses. And the reason why these are widely accepted is because when you look at somebody like a strength athlete, bodybuilder, strength athlete and powerlifter compared to a bodybuilder, because they do different rep ranges, they do different styles of training, their appearances are usually visibly very, very different. Okay. As you can see from the two cells on the screen, we have the myofibrils, which are inside the cell, and then the surrounding fluid inside the cell is called sarcoplasm. Okay, now what you can see from your sarcomere, the smaller cell, is basically 6 myofibrils in there, right? It's not a huge cell compared to the one to the right. Okay, the one to the right is the equivalent of you going in and doing sets of 15 to 20 reps or sets of 12 to 15 reps on bicep curls, like 4 sets, and the pump just comes in the arms. Okay, you have not increased the myofibrils, you've just increased the fluid that's got into the cell. Okay, so the intercellular fluids, blood, all that sort of stuff that's bringing in. As you can see here, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy and sarcomere hypertrophy are the observational terms given the different types of hypertrophy, but they're brought about by different mechanisms in terms of different styles of training and what we're doing. Sarcomere hypertrophy appears to elicit an increase in myofibrils. Okay, so that's the hardening. This appears to create an increase in muscular density. This is why we say to usually our female clients who are like, oh, I want to get toned. Well, that's why we need to lift heavy, because then we're going to get a nice, hard, dense muscle. Obviously, we're not going to use that terminology. We're going to say the best way to tone you is to obviously lift heavy. A lot of the times you're going to come back with, oh, I don't want to look big and bulky and so forth. And it's like, okay, that's impossible. But that's why we need to do that sort of stuff. Basically, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy appears to, that should be sarcoplasmic, not sarcomere. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy appears to create cellular swelling as opposed to density. This is displayed in the appearance of bodybuilders versus powerlifters. Okay, and it's displayed from the right cell, the cell on the right hand side compared to the cell on the left hand side. This is them just close up, and you can see that, intercellular fluid just in the round. Now, what we want a lot of the time for most people is the far right cell. We want myofibrillar increase, so it increases cell density, and we also want that ability to grow with a sarcoplasmic. So you've got your myofibrils on your left hand side, the muscle fiber. It's got 4 myofibrils, small cell. Then you've got one that's just basically got pumped up in the middle. And then what we have is an increase in myofibril density. Okay, so you've got more myofibrils in there, makes the muscle harder, denser. Okay, and if you want to look at it in terms of, the middle one is what people call watery muscles. the one on the right hand side is a mixture, combination of the both. Okay, so an increase in cells as well as hard, dense muscle. And a term we'll talk about here at the bottom called hyperplasia, but essentially what's happening is we have the cell, we have the nucleus in the cell, we have the surrounding cytoplasm. When we go into hypertrophy, the cell just gets bigger. Okay, that's just basically what happens. Then you've got hyperplasia, which has never been founded in humans, but it has been seen in rats. And if anybody's ever heard of a training called fascial stretch training, FST7, that was its bold claims. Basically stretching the tissue when it had blood flow in it was said to increase hyperplasia. And what hyperplasia basically means is, instead of the 4 cells that we have in the two, two displays at the top, we now have 6 cells. Because what's happened is, a bit like your normal fat cell, a fat cell will get so big, and when it can't get any bigger, it'll split and form a new cell. Okay, that's called hyperplasia. Okay, in some places it may be called mitosis as well, where cell splits. But that's what they are predicting is usually happening whenever we're doing this sort of type of training. But we are really focusing on the first 2. And as we see here, same thing. The myofibrils in there with the cell, cytoplasm round. You just got one that's pumped up, and now you've got one to the split. And hyperplasia is the proliferation of muscle cells through fiber splitting. And that's basically what we're trying to do with, hypertrophy. If it is muscle building, we're trying to break down muscle tissue so that it grows back bigger, stronger. In animal tests, hyperplasia has been proven through stretching a muscle. Still not confirmed in humans, but if you look up FST7, it's usually about after the 7th set, you'll stretch the muscle tissue. If anybody followed my Instagram during the week, I basically did a vertical pull and a stretch. So I did weighted chins, and then what I did was a weighted pullover. So the way I do my mobility is I put it into an active form movement as well. So instead of you sitting on the ground doing a kettlebell pullover and laying there, it's like, okay, how can I bring this into my world? How can I bring this into my training? Okay, so what I did was, as I started to do chins, I started to get blood flow in and around the lats. Obviously, an increase in blood flow in that area makes the muscle more pliable, so then I can stretch the shit out of it, okay, and feel a little bit safer. So I did vertical chins, pull over holds. The next one was seated rows, and then obviously a lat stretch. And obviously, if I'm stretching that, I'm increasing the blood flow that's going to get to that muscle as well. Okay, so I'm not saying that I'm developing, hyperplasia and shit like that. I just know that a looser, more pliable, more range of motion in muscle tissue is going to bring along an increase of blood flow, which is obviously going to be great if you're trying to build muscle. Okay, so tight muscles are really hard to get blood flow into and really hard to grow. Okay, there's an awesome video online. I think it's Muscle and Fitness, and it's an old bodybuilder. He doesn't compete anymore, Dennis Wolf. And he literally goes in and gets a massage, and the difference in the size of his tissue from the tight muscles being released, the increased blood flow getting into there, will show you what I mean by in terms of why it's so important. Now, there's always people spouting what the most important principle or what the most important component is of building muscle. And people will come back and forth. They'll say, it's frequency, it's training the muscle often. No, it's lifting more each time. And they'll argue until they're blue in the face. They're all part of the overall picture. Okay, so they all make a difference to that increase in muscle size or density or whatever it is they're looking. So we've got neural adaptation. Neural adaptation is pretty much lifting heavier every session. It's basically a strength component. This is what happens when you're doing low reps. You're literally trying to adapt, or you're getting your brain to adapt to the movement that you're doing. The more you practice the movement,
Have we lost Paddy? Is everybody? Is it just me?
Nah, I think
No, it's me as
Don't worry.
well.
Must be his Wi-Fi maybe.
what happens here then? Usually has to shut it down, doesn't he? Just come back on, or
I think he just comes back on, you know.
Hmm.
How you all getting on with writing your programs? Have you done it yet?
oh Jesus, I haven't done a thing. I haven't looked at it. When are yours? Mine's on. We're back.
To cut off there. Must be the Wi-Fi. One, what's happening, bud?
What's the crack? Not a lot.
Good. Anyone else join us there? So I'll just get back to where I was there. We were on this page, yeah?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So like we were saying, there is not one principle that is overriding. Most people will say, it's progressive overload. That little bit, you have to challenge your nervous system. You have to challenge your muscle tissue. Yes, that has a massive, probably up there towards the top end, frequency, volume, all that sort of stuff. But like I said, it all plays a role in the bigger picture. We have mechanical tension, actually making sure that we put tension through a muscle in terms of if we have a lagging body part that we're trying to bring up. We maybe have somebody coming off an injury that we're trying to, improve or get back some muscle size in that area. Then we need to be able to know what the function of that muscle is, how can we keep tension on that muscle so that we can get the most out of it. Metabolic stress and metabolic damage can go sort of hand in hand to a degree. The metabolic stress in terms of our cells and our muscles have this receptor in there, mechanical receptor, that will sense a difference in pH level. So if we're talking about lactic acid, we're talking about the buildup of hydrogen ions and this burning effect, it changes the pH level. It's obviously going to cause some form of metabolic stress. And the metabolic damage is us trying to break down fibers and tear down the muscles as best as we actually can. Now that will all be condensed down into this trifecta of volume, intensity, frequency. Okay, so all those components are going to be probably put into a program, which is going to then turn around and look at how frequently are we going to train, how frequently are we going to train certain muscles, how much volume, because there is a certain amount of volume that is minimal for us to maintain. There's a certain amount of volume that is our maximal recoverable volume, like where we can actually do that amount of load, recover and grow. And then there's an overreaching where we may end up developing what's known as reversibility, where we actually start getting worse because we're overtraining. Intensity in terms of load, progressive overload, does the volume, come down as the intensity and weight comes up? Is the intensity an intensity technique like drop sets, failure sets in terms of hypertrophy? So there's loads of different things that come into that. And then some of the smaller factors at the bottom in terms of exercise selection, because certain exercises are going to be better for certain muscle groups, and what we execute certain exercises are going to play a role. For example, if someone does a barbell back squat and they're very hip dominant, and then you may go, do you know what, I'm going to change this to a front squat, which is a lot more knee dominant. So there's going to be a difference in terms of how the muscle's going to look, because a lot of that muscle around the VMO, the teardrop, is going to get a little bit more development as opposed to the hip. Okay. Rest periods matter as well. So obviously, if you have less rest period, shorter rest period, you're going to create a lot of metabolic stress in there, a lot of lactic acid buildup, and we obviously know that people will always say that an increase in lactic acid will preclude an increase in we call it growth hormone. Sorry. And we've got failure sets, which are an amazing tool as well, because we're literally using progressive overload, but in a different way. The problem I have with failure sets is people use them far too much, and your nervous system needs a break as well. Pretty much overused a lot. Then we've got time under tension, tempos, all these different things and variables that we can use to make a program harder, or try and get the most out of a muscle in one session, stuff as well. So go ahead. Anyone have a question there?
Could you give a couple of, see, like progressive muscle overload, could you give a couple examples, like how you would use in programs, or
progressive overload? Yeah, we're gonna talk about that in slides. Basically the story of Milo. So that's the very easiest way to look at progressive overload. For anyone who's not familiar, Milo was this farmer. Whenever a newborn calf was born, he put it on his shoulder, started walking with it. As the calf got heavier and heavier as it fed every day, he obviously got progressively stronger and fitter. The problem with progressive overload for me is a lot of people go too heavy too soon. And it's pretty much trying to add more weight each session, or be able to do more reps, than you did previously. And we'll talk about the fitness components and recovery and fatigue and performance aspect of that as well. We'll cover that, Marty. Don't worry. So neural adaptation, pretty much what we were talking about there. Almost all short-term adaptations to resistance training will be strength related, and therefore the result of neural adaptation. So your body becoming more proficient at the movement that you're doing, you get stronger at that movement, and then that movement becomes even more efficient. Hahnemann's Say's principle states that motor units are recruited in order from the smallest motor units and motor neurons all the way up to the largest. Okay, so to give you an example of that is, if I had a suitcase here with nothing in it, it was completely empty, and I told you that there was 25 kilos of weight, you would brace yourself. You'd be telling yourself, even though motor unit recruitment is largely, subconscious, like your body fires without you even telling it, but you can brace yourself to go, do you know what, I'm going to lift this. Oh, well, that was really, really light. The same with the other way around. So motor unit recruitment and firing will dictate the amount of force that is generated. So the better you are at tapping into those bigger muscle groups, more powerful, more explosive, the better you are as an athlete. Okay, so that's why if we're talking about strength and conditioning, we're talking about power-based training, speed, movement, stuff like that, developing that, because that will develop the overall physique of someone, or they'll develop the overall athlete. Utilizing intent and production of force, the body will successfully recruit more motor units and therefore more contractile myofibrils. Okay, so as you can see down here on the little slide, we have muscle force on the left hand side, we have percentage of motor units recruited. So slow oxidative movements, like if you're thinking about walking, or if we're thinking about training here, think of an exercise that's really simple to do for you. You've done continuously, it's not going to gas you. I'm just thinking like push-ups here or something, for example. You can recover from that unless you start banging them out fast. As you start going up, in terms of you start to lift heavier weights, your body starts to recruit more muscles. Okay, so it's like, okay, I need more fibers to actually fire this muscle. Okay, until we get to the most fast glycotic stuff. If we look at that in terms of sports, we're looking at weightlifting, we're looking at sprints, we're looking at maybe discus, stuff like that. Stuff that is really, really explosive. Okay, and like I said, we may want to bring, depending on if you're working with a client who's an athlete, you might want to bring them in their training through all those phases. You may want to build that tier base of conditioning, endurance. The component we were talking about the other day was accumulation. So an accumulation of repetitions, movements, and what you're doing, an intensification, so intensity going up, and then a realization of, does this translate into the athlete's sport, like in terms of them getting more explosive or whatever it is, or for a power lifter, it may be actually being able to move a weight that they used to move that was a 1 RM, it's now 5 RM, they're moving it quicker, all these sort of different things. And we can see here on the top left hand side, okay, we have muscle fiber recruitment. You have type 1 muscle fibers, type 2A, type 2B, type 2B being our more explosive, or type 2X. And like I said, our body is a very, very efficient machine. If it can use the littlest or the least amount of energy, motor units, it will. Okay, so that's where, again, neural activation, intent in your movement, a lot of this stuff can play a massive role in terms of getting bigger, getting stronger and stuff as well. If we are doing a very, very light movement that doesn't need a huge amount of muscle fibers or motor units activated, if we bring that smaller muscle to fatigue, what do you think is going to happen? So you do something really, really light. I have my phone, I start doing bicep curls. After a certain amount, once I've just max that out, what do you think is going to happen?
Lactic acid.
You'll get an increase in lactic acid. Yeah, obviously the slower smaller muscle group is a little bit maxed out. So
it'll recruit more fibers.
Bingo. 100%. It's a bit like somebody hits you and your mate comes and backs you up, right? Pretty much when we fatigue those muscles, our body is an amazing machine. Like if it feels like it's under stress, it's like, right, all hands on deck. We need to sort this shit out. And it'll try and recruit as much muscles as it can to facilitate the movement, okay? And obviously, as you can see here, right up until the largest muscle fibers on the left-hand side. If we move to the right-hand side, the top right, SAGE principle, orderly recruitment of muscle fibers, the little dotted line is the hypertrophic potential. You can estimate that, but it sometimes it isn't always going to be the way. Where people meet failure. And if you can see here, type 1A, so percentage of 1 RM on the left-hand side, and then the fiber recruitment at the bottom. So obviously a lower percentage of load of the 1 RM is going to be pretty much type 1 fibers, okay? When we start to get a little bit into, maybe 50, 60% of our 1 RM, you're starting to recruit type 2A muscle fibers. And then when you're starting to get to that higher end, 85 upwards percentage of 1 RM, you're really going to be recruiting your type 2A or obviously type 2X muscle fibers. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, so is this sort of like the same as sprinters, isn't it? An energy system. So like on the left you would have the endurance runner, and on the right then you have sprinter.
Yep. And you'll always realize that when you're lifting a really heavy weight, it may not look like it's moving fast, but you're trying to move it as quickly as possible. So the scenario would be if you have two lifters who can deadlift 200 kilos, but one deadlifts it faster, who's stronger?
One deadlifting faster.
Exactly. Even though they can only deadlift the same weight, the potential for the person who moves the weight and creates more velocity and more power is the likelier winner going to be able to lift more. Okay, so that's obviously why speed and sort of power stuff comes in there. Now the bottom one is a joint. So if you can see here, you've got percentage of fibers used, and then you've got the muscular force. So the force in terms of how much load is going on. So if you look at just the wee guy who is, I'll bring this up here, the guy who's squatting, right? So just for example, imagine that guy is squatting 40 kilos. Imagine he can squat 200 kilos. Squatting 40 kilos, it's not a huge load for him. His body's just like, type 1 favors. It's not really going to do too much for me. Next minute, he's up to 100 kilos or 110 kilos. And now the type 2 favors are kicking in with those type 1s as well. Okay, and then when he's getting to a sub-maximal, what we're obviously going to see is the amount of favors, the percentage of favors he uses is going to be higher. And then he's going to be recruiting all those muscle favors to assist in the movement and stuff as well. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so the higher the intensity, the more load that we use, the more increase in terms of muscle size, muscle fibers, they're going to kick in as well. So the body fires the muscle fibers in order of slow to fast. When the load is placed on the muscle, slow twitch fibers fire first, is what we're saying. If they can't produce enough force to counteract the load of preceding fibers recruited, this is the law of all or nothing. Okay, so pretty much you can't really decide if the muscle fires or not. You can initiate the movement, you can think about it, but it either fires or it doesn't. And as you can see here from more of a cardiovascular type, you have type 1, slow twitch, as we're talking about energy systems, and genetic sort of potentials as well. Slow twitch muscle fibers, the 400 to 800 meter sprinter is going to be obviously type 2A. And then you've got obviously your Usain Bolts who are going to be very, very fast, explosive, ATP, creatine, phosphate, glycolytic, anaerobic based systems, and the muscle fibers will develop in that way as well. So this is something that's quite interesting. Okay, so on the top slide we have a predicted, based off what way people train their muscle fibers and how that reacts. Now there is a massive genetic component. Okay, we can manipulate our genetics by about 10-15% at most, but for most part you're looking at it genetically. And I remember speaking to a distance running scout in America, and obviously when they're scouting people, what they're looking for in runners is a nice long slender calf. Okay, it's better for running, better for endurance, better for distance. He doesn't want someone running with a big bulky bodybuilder diamond calf. Okay, because those people are better suited to power sports or more explosive based movements. Right, so genetically we're already predisposed to being better at certain things. I remember before, the Russians were always the best at this. They would have looked for their female athletes for coarse dark hairs on their arms. You might see it sometimes on chin, stuff like that, as long as they don't have stuff like PCOS. And what they attributed that to was higher androgen levels than your typical female. Okay, so they said, well, these people are probably going to be better at power sports. So they were already pre-selecting on genetics, and then obviously doing the training in there as well. So when it says 50% fast twitch, 50% slow twitch for an untrained individual, that is completely wrong, because the genetic component is probably going to make the difference there. But for just circumstantial reasons, it's easier just to compare it. Now you look at someone who is a slow runner. Okay, so an endurance-based middle distance runner. Because of the way that he trains, what is his going to be predominant type fiber? Yes, Joe?
Type 1.
Type 1. He's going to be slow twitch because that's what he trains. That's his sport. Now he can do some fast twitch movements, explosive, maybe 400s or 200s, whatever it is. But because of his sport and what he does, he is predominantly going to be a slow twitch fiber. Okay, so that's where I was saying the other day, in Ireland, like, what sports are we known for, right? Worldwide, it's probably going to be boxing, right? We haven't had, I'm probably going to say ever, a heavy-handed knockout artist in boxing, right? Genetically, it's just not really in us. When you get to the top level, it's very hard for us Irish boxers to be able to knock people out. Where you look at who are dominating in that side now, you're looking at the likes of Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan. These guys are explosive, heavy-handed sort of fighters. So I sort of joked before, I was like, we need one of them fighters to come over, have a baby with a nice Irish woman, and then we'll get a mixture of good endurance and good knockout power. And I think a lot of it comes down to as well the way that we've trained, the way that we've conditioned ourselves. Boxing over here especially, there wasn't a lot of S&C for years. It was just repetition, 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 repetition. So there's genetic component, there's a training component, and I sort of joked. I was like, imagine you were a predominantly an explosive sort of person, and all you're ever taught, whether you're in school or at home, is don't run, slow down. Like, imagine you were just free to do whatever you wanted. This actually went through my head one time. I was like, imagine, see if my teacher hadn't told me to stop running the corridors, I probably could have been faster. You know what I mean? That's my predominant age to get better. So just going off a bit on a tangent, but just in terms of that genetic and obviously how we train it. And that's probably why you see, kid athletes, the Chinese especially, that famous, well, not famous quote, but it's like there's, you hit a PB and there's a Chinese kid out there that warms up with your max. They're genetically, based on their height and build, are really, really good for power sports. And then obviously if they're training a certain way from a certain time frame, it obviously develops that as well. Now, if you look at elite level sprinters, obviously what are they going to be more dominant in?
Type 2B, is it?
Yep, explosive type 2B, type 2, type 2A. So that is their sport. That's what they train for. They train to be explosive. Then you've got weightlifters and powerlifters, which again can be pretty much over both sides. I would say that the 60-40 is probably more towards probably more powerlifters, probably a little bit more for weightlifters because they have to be a little bit more explosive. But yeah, it's not a bad way to think about it because they obviously need to train both. Is anybody familiar with Neil Hill, Yoda, Y3T training? No. He trains Flex Lewis, Mr. Olympia 212. He also trained William Bonac and stuff as well. And a lot of his programming, it's an awesome program, it goes in like a 3-week cycle. His program was based around what we were saying before this, all or nothing principle. So he would do more higher rep, higher volume stuff, which we know the intensity isn't, really, really high. So that like how heavy it is isn't that tough. But he would pre-exhaust, or he would exhaust you so much of your type 1 that your type 2 would have to kick in, right? Now we know from a physique and bodybuilding perspective, type 1 muscle fibers are the predominant fibers because people are doing slow movements. They make up 2/3 generally of most weightlifters or bodybuilders, so they obviously want to grow them. But Neil Hill stuff was, I want to grow everything. I want to grow fast twitch. I want to grow slow twitch as well. And we know if we completely fatigue that muscle, then we can kick into those other fibers as well. Then if I bring this up here, then you've got at the bottom right hand say competitive bodybuilders, recreational, just your normal gym goer, endurance roars, and a control group was based on a sort of study. Competitive bodybuilders are more predominantly type 2A, and like the next dominant is type 1, and then obviously the least of what they have, the minority in terms of those fibers, is going to be type 2B. Why do you think that is? And I just sort of mentioned it there.
Sorry, what was it again?
Like the competitive bodybuilder is predominantly type 2A and type 1. Why does he not have higher type 2, B, type 2 explosive sort of fibers in his body?
Does it do lots of volume?
Yeah, But sure, if we base that on the all or nothing, if he fatigues, he should be kicking into those type 2 fibers as well. Any ideas? So if we think back to the Hahnemann says principle, or the percentage of 1 RMs, if they're doing between 6 to 12 reps to increase, fluid and size in the muscle, they're using predominantly type 2A muscle fibers. And then if they're trying to break down the tissue, slower eccentric style training, so slower base movements are obviously going to be more predominant. So they're not really doing a lot of explosive movements. So that's why those type 2B fibers are not being developed as much. That's why we're getting the type 2A and the type 2 or type 1. So if you think of them as just like percentage of 1 RM, they're going to be in that 50 to 80% most of the time in terms of the loads that they lift, which is going to be predominantly type 2A fibers. Okay? Then you've got your normal recreational trainee who's pretty much the same, but they have higher type 2B fibers. Why do you think that is? Any ideas on that? No. So it could be their genetic potential, what they're born with. It could also be the fact that if you ever watch an average gym goer in the gym, are they doing anything slow?
No.
They're like, that everything's fast, explosive. That's, the body just wanting to move something really, really quick. And obviously, aside with maybe their own genetic potential, could be the reason why those type 2B fibers are obviously, getting a little bit of work. Also, the fact that they love maxing out. Your average dude wants to lift heavier and tries to lift heavier all the time as well. Endurance rowers, so they are predominantly type 2A, and then their next predominant is type 2B, explosive, and then obviously their least is type 1. Why do you think their explosive fibers are so good for an endurance rower?
Because probably on the home straight, maybe is it that they have to pick it up?
Yeah, it could do. And they could train that as well. Yeah, it could be definitely a part of it. Anything else? Anybody, any other ideas? Also, the fact of what we were talking about before. Okay. All or nothing. If they're in an endurance-based sport and they fatigue those slow twitch fibers and they fatigue those type 2A fibers, what's going to kick in as well? Type 2B. Okay, so there could be a component of them in training that in terms of sprint-based stuff, but also the fact of they're getting that work because they're enduring so much as well. Okay, and then obviously the control group is pretty much across the board, higher type 2B, type 2A, and then obviously type 1, more or less about average. Okay, and this is where probably the holy grail of potentially where most people want to be if you're looking at a physique ways. They want to have an increase in neuromuscular efficiency. They want to get better at the movements that they do so they can lift heavier loads. They want myofibrillar hypertrophy, which means, as you can see from the cell below it, that you get an increase in myofibrils along with the actual cell size. And then you've got the pump stuff. So sarcoplasmic pump, 9 to 15 reps, where we're getting an increase in size of the muscle. John Meadows, mountain dog training guy I trained with, his training programs are pretty much based around all three of these principles. So a lot of times people are like, no, this is a strength block. I'm focusing purely on strength. His stuff is like, I want the best of everything. I want to get stronger. I want to increase that size and density, and I want to pump. So he's looking back at all those mechanisms in terms of mechanical tension, metabolic stress, metabolic damage, neuromuscular efficiency. And he wants all of those, and they're all programmed in. And people go, well, how do you do that? And it's like, it's really fucking easy. If you look at the 1 to 5, what's your strength movement? Oh, I'm doing bench press. Okay, great. Your 68 rep movement, Okay, let's do an incline dumbbell press. The 9 to 15 rep movement. Okay, let's do some chest flies. So you're pretty much invoking all these things on a generic basic program that you could pick up on the internet anywhere. But the thing is, a lot of people don't realize why they're doing that. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, would it be better if you are an athlete to focus purely on your athletic development? Yes, it would. But I'm talking here in terms of general across the board. Did anybody who got Venler 531 program? For the program training? Anybody? No?
No.
So Jim Venner has a program called 531. It's a strength training program. It's pretty much 4 days a week: squat, bench, deadlift, multi press. And the way it starts off is it is in 3-week blocks with a fourth week deload. Your first week is accumulation, where you're actually doing higher reps. You do 3 sets of 5. On your last set of 5, you do as many reps as you can at a certain percentage. The next week, you do 3 sets of 3, and you do as many reps as you can in the last set. And then on the third week, you do 5-3-1, and try to do as many reps as you can of that 1 rep based on a certain percentage. And what that does is the number that you hit, say I give you, Joe, say you can bench 100 kilos, and then your 5-3-1, you're at 78 or 77.5 kilos, and you get 8 reps out of it. Then that will be predetermined how much you're going to lift in your next cycle, your next training cycle, right? Because you've, beat it by a certain amount of reps, we're going to put it up 5 kilos instead of putting it up 2.5 kilos on your bench press for the next cycle. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. And the way that's broken down is week 1 is the accumulation of volume. Week 2 is an intensification where we're actually getting it heavier. And then week 3 is a realization of, has this actually worked? Have we seen an increase in training and so forth? And then the 4th week is a deload, and then it moves up. So basically what I like to call it is more of a step linear cycle. I know that might sound sort of confusing, but it pretty much looks like this. That's week 2, that's week 3, week 4. And then what's going to happen is you're going to start off at the weights you used for week 2 on your next cycle. Down, and then the same thing again, up, up, up. So you're getting progressively stronger with deloads factored in there and stuff as well. The other thing is that with Venler's program, and this has been copied on numerous occasions as well, is that he has assistance exercises. On the assistance exercises is, if he's training bench that day, he may have incline dumbbell press, he might have chest flies, he might have, tricep dips, he might have all this here. But the rep ranges are hypertrophy and endurance rep ranges. But this is for a powerlifter. It can all work across the board. Okay, so if you know that I'm becoming more neuromuscular efficient in this movement, getting better at it, getting stronger at it, then I look at it, what are my weak body parts that I need to bring up that is going to help me for this main movement? And has anyone ever tried blood flow restriction training or Katsu training? Maybe no, for some people. No. So essentially what it is occluding the top of your limbs, so the top of your arm, the top of your legs, and reducing the venous return of blood, getting out of the actual muscle. So as you do an exercise, you've got, a tourniquet on, basically usually like the ones you see and thing. And then as you get a pump on, what's happening is all the blood, all that, sarcoplasm is getting into the cell. It's finding it difficult to find its way back. And what happens is the blood starts pulling in the muscle, and the muscle starts getting bigger and bigger, right? It's completely different to a pump that you've maybe experienced in the gym where your skin feels tight. You're like, oh, that's nice. This feels like someone has just went in and blown your arm up like a balloon, right? Now, it's been more widely used in bodybuilding the last couple of years, but what it was predominantly used for when it started was to help people who lost limbs. Right, so someone went to war, got their leg blew off, they occluded the top of the leg, got them to exercise because it increased recovery. Okay, so we know that we get blood flow to that area, we get an increase in nutrients as well. Okay, now I use BFR for a pump, which is going to be like this, just pretty much to blow the muscle up, try and tear down the fibers. I also use it for recovery. So what will happen is I go in, I squat heavy on a Monday, my legs are fried, but I'm trying to grow my legs. So what I do is I do a blood flow restriction on leg extensions, right? So I can still train the quad muscle, and it has shown, increases in muscle strength and size with only 30% of your 1RM. So think of it like this. I've squatted 200 kilos a day before, my legs are fried, but I want to recover quicker. So I want to get blood flow back into that area. I don't want to be sitting about and aching and, look like I've shit myself walking downstairs. I want to increase that blood flow. I want to increase the frequency at which I train that muscle at. So I go in, I do some leg extensions, some leg curls, and get that blood back in there. Okay, so there's ways that we can manipulate things. That's pretty much a lot of the time the way I rate my programs for people. I always have a strength component. I think strength is non-negotiable. It doesn't matter what your sport is, what you're looking to achieve, weight loss, muscle gain, getting stronger. If we look at it as progressive overload, we're nailing that progressive overload. Then we're looking into, hypertrophy. Where could someone, put on a little bit more size that is going to help them with either the strength movements or, visibly, if we're talking about body composition, because that's what we deal with at Hybrid, is how can we make that person look better? I explain to people, think of you as a piece of, marble, and you're trying to carve your perfect body. It's not about having big muscles. It could be a lean stomach for you. It could be a toned stomach, but exercise, you pick an area that you want to improve and we work on that. Okay, and it's you crafting your own body, and that's why I always say to clients, like, you are a bodybuilder, and they're like, no, I'm not. I'm like, you're trying to build your best body, wherever way you see it. You tell me what that is, and I tell you how to do it. And then obviously we have the sarcoplasmic, which is obviously going to bring more blood flow, increase in fluid, which we know is actually good for, increasing the size of the cell, bringing satellite cells in there, more mitochondria. And then obviously we get bigger muscles, which makes us look good visibly, and also enhances recovery. So there's loads of different components that can help. And I'll always just sort of program those things into pretty much everybody's program. I just think, especially general pop, you can get away with just going across the board with them. And then if the way you want to look at it as well is CrossFit does the same thing. CrossFit will always have a strength component, and then they'll fuck you up. You know what I mean? So completely fatiguing muscle fibers, and obviously we know that the rest are going to kick in. So if we look at the 1 to 5 reps, the increase in neuromuscular efficiency, there's no increase in the size of the fiber, okay? But the actual force that your body can produce gets better, okay? So the strength that you actually gain becomes better. You become more efficient at that. 68 reps, myofibrillar hypertrophy. So we're getting an increase in fibers and myofibrils, the increase in contractile force, as well as an increase in size in the muscle. Okay, I'm not saying 68 reps is the perfect rep range to be in, but there is a nice crossover between those two. 9 to 15 reps, sarcoplasmic, an increase in size as fiber gains fluid with no contraction force increase. Okay, so we're just thinking about repetitions and moving that stuff as well. Any questions about that so far?
I have a quick question there.
Go ahead on.
See, in the terms of programs, like say you done like 5x5 and bench, I would cover the first one, and then like a barbell bench press, so that's like a compound, and then say like 6 to 8 on like dumbbell bench press, and then 15 push-ups. That'd be like covering all angles.
Yeah, could do, bud. Yeah.
Just trying to put it under some sort of context for myself.
100%. Just to go on to, like we were saying about that John Meadows stuff, is he always likes to put in a pump movement. So he has a strength, explosive strength sort of movement. The way his program was that there's pre-activation. So if we were doing bench, we might, do rotator cuff pre-activation or rear delt activation or even just chest activation. Then we'll do our explosive movement, which is bench press. Like we're trying to like lift that weight as explosive as we possibly can at a heavy weight. And then we'll go into that, as you were saying there, your incline dumbbell bench press, which is probably a little bit more slow and controlled, still heavy enough to challenge you for anywhere between those to 12 reps. And then, because if you are strong enough in the push-ups, you can get a lot of reps in. You can get a high pump in there as well. And then he would likes to finish with a stretch exercise. So that gave me so many ideas in terms of, what way, I should train. Like I was talking earlier about, doing the vertical pull, doing the other day in my training, I was doing weighted chins, right? So I know rear delts, biceps, lats are going to get an increase in blood flow going to that area. And then what I did was I stretched it, right? And then what I've done before is I've done a couple of exercises, maybe on a body part, and then I've stretched the shit out of it. I had every Saturday in the gym when I started was just a pump club. It was to keep me accountable, and then also try and give people a little bit different training that we currently do for the group. Lo and behold, I was doing it because I was going to sell them into a higher price program. But it was just like, listen, who wants to join me Saturday 8 a.m. This is just purely bodybuilding, like pump-based session, really focusing on growing and getting bigger, not necessarily stronger and losing weight and stuff like that there. So I used to get a lot of guys who would come, and there was basically just did a giant set or a quad set on back. So it was like lat pull downs, seated rows, dead stop, croc rows. So basically changing the angle of what we train the lats from vertical to slightly angled to completely horizontal, and then we stretch the shit out of it. So different parts of the lat in terms of where it attaches in the shoulder, the spine, to the iliac crest, ASIS, sorry. So, and then we stretch that, and every single one of them were like, Jesus, after the stretch, like the pump in my lats is amazing. Because we were saying there, we got an increase in blood flow, we stretched it, we allowed more blood to get into that, and obviously the next couple of sets, you could just feel that muscle just popping even more. So yeah, you could use that, and like I said, I like to finish with stretch. So if I give you an example of a stretch movement for the pecs, when we go on to the next part of this, we'll not do it tonight, and we look at the basic function of the pecs, right? It immediately rotates the shoulder, right? So it brings it in this way, and to fully shorten the pecs, we must cross the midline, okay? So we've got sternal fibers that run up the glenohumeral joint, so we know if to shorten them, we come across the body. To stretch them, we need to open the body up, okay? As you can see here, the fibers start to stretch. So we can look at stuff like flies as a stretch-based movement. We can look at stuff where we can increase that range of movement and get a stretch across those fibers as well. And I don't know if you were here earlier on, but like I was saying, with my sort of, mobility work, I like to include weights. So like I always say, there's mobility, there's loaded mobility, and the movements that you do will add to that as well. And it's pretty much a lot like, if you don't use it, you lose it. You know what I mean? So if I have someone who's doing a lot of chest, a lot of shoulders, a lot of arms, immediately internally rotated a lot, do you think it's going to be easy or difficult for them to get into a low bar back squat?
Difficult.
Extremely difficult, because they don't train that movement, they don't train that range, they don't train their fibers in that range either. And then also the fact that they're just so rounded, it's going to be hard for them to actually be able to externally rotate their shoulders and get back into that. So playing about with that, using them is interesting, because like I said, for me, it brings a better crossover, because it's not you, because I'm sick of seeing people lying in a gym with a band around their leg, pulling their leg up, stretching their hamstring on the ground, right? Okay, is that going to, relax the muscle, increase, fit? Yeah. But how does that translate on the gym floor? How does that translate into my athlete getting better or, you know, reducing that? Do we then move into single leg, you know, RDLs? Is that going to help? Yep. Hop jumps or single leg broad jumps. And we start to go, this stuff needs to be trained as well as that. You know what I mean? So the transition over into what we do in the gym has to come over, because there's very, very few exercises where we're going to lie on our back. You know? Okay, so mechanical tension. This is something that when I was starting off, you know, I kept hearing a lot of, you know, you got to put tension through the muscle and so forth. And I'm like, okay, what the fuck does that mean? And then also the fact of how do you do it? Because a lot of people just lift weights, and because of a basic sort of movement, a lot of the time the muscle should actually work. But knowing how to actually fully activate a muscle is really, it's obviously going to be beneficial, because then you know that is what's working, and you know you're getting the most out of that session. So for example, little things I did the other day was, if you take, everyone needs to do this for me. If you take your shoulder, okay, I'm just going to bring this up here. So we're going to take our shoulders, we're going to pull it back. Okay, so we're going to squeeze your shoulder blade, and our chest is going to hike up. And then all I want you to do is bring your arm across your body with your shoulder packed. Okay, so your shoulder's tight and it's across the body. Okay, now what you should feel is an increase in your pack. Right, your pack should feel tight. Yeah? Yep, good. Okay, so what we're doing is we're looking at how do we shorten the muscle. We're shortening the muscle by coming across the sternal, okay, coming across the midline of the body. Now, what I want you to think of is when we're doing base movements like that, I want you now to place your hand on there. I want you to keep your shoulder squeezed, and I want you to apply a little bit of tension to stop your arm from getting in. Okay, so you're still coming across your body, but you're just applying a little bit of tension. Okay, keep that shoulder packed and down. Can you feel that? You just get a little bit more. Okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to squeeze the fist as you do it. Okay, so we're doing the same thing. Okay. Now we're going to do a combination of both. We are going to, as we bring this across, I'm going to try and push this down at the same time. So it's trying to come down that way. I'm going to try and push this down as well as, you know, push up against it. So I'm trying to push it that way and push it down. So I'm bringing this across my body. Okay, so you're pushing down, pushing up against it, and you're pushing in towards your midline. Okay, so you can start to notice the tension starts to increase a little bit more and more. Okay, now another one, it's easy to do the major part of the packs, because, you know, that's the predominant muscle. It's the upper packs that get, you know, the hardest rap, right? So I want you to bring your arm above your shoulder. Okay, so my hand is higher than my shoulder. It's not in line with my shoulder. And all I want you to do is bring your arm across your chest again. Okay, and you should feel this upper part of your chest sort of hike up a little bit. Yeah? These all look like these are doing Hail Hitler. No, it smells okay. I had a shower there. Right, so this is where if I was training someone to increase, you know, the chest size and their upper packs, I wouldn't necessarily always go, oh, well, let's go straight to an incline press. We look at what way it's being executed. Okay, so we need to have these fibers up more towards the clavicle, and the same thing can apply. So all I want you to do, as you can see there, is I'm going to bring this across the body and I'm going to stop myself. Okay, but keep that arm up. Okay, keep the shoulder packed as well. And what we should feel is the top part working more, not as much the bottom part. And if you want to feel that, you can put your hand down the chest. It should feel flat compared to if you brought it down. Yeah, everybody get that?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's ways of there's ways that we contract the muscle. There's ways that we move the muscle. There's little like hints and tips that we use to get the most out of it. Okay, so when I used to go, well, how do you put mechanical tension? Like, Jesus, what's going on? Do you remember when we did the squat with our heels elevated? We just did a body weight squat, and I told you to push through your big toe, or I told you to try and push your ankles out, and you start to feel it more on the outside of the leg, or if I tell you to push through your toe, you start to feel it more on the inside of the quad. That's what we're talking about. We're understanding, or I was trying to get you to understand what way the muscle is designed to function and how can we create tension in that. Because then all we do is you'll start to be able to apply exercises to the function, rather than what happens is people just exercise because they know roughly what area sort of works. But mechanical tension is finding the way that maximizes the most out of that muscle in any given place. Okay, and then obviously we have muscular damage. Okay, so muscular damage of how much we can tear those fibers down, how much that we can create a new environment to grow. So like, can we use failure sets? Can we use drop sets? Can we use intensity techniques? Obviously that'll cross over with metabolic stress, but it's that damage that we're trying to do. We're trying to lift heavier. We're trying to break down those fibers a lot more. Okay. And then metabolic stress, as Arnie says, if someone can read that out for me.
Best activities for your health are pumping and humping.
So Arnie was ahead of his time. Like the stress that he was putting on by doing higher reps, higher volume stuff, was obviously creating a lot of metabolic stress, which was an important component. And a big thing that people don't really know about Arnie was Arnie used to powerlift and he used to Olympic lift, and he won a couple of powerlifting, a couple of Olympic lifting competitions in his younger days, training wise. So he would have trained strength and power as well. So he would have had that muscle density and hardening of the muscle, as well as doing, as he progressively went on, doing more hypertrophy. But he was always big into getting stronger as well. Okay. And yep, the pump again is better than coming, apparently. If you watch Pump and Iron. If anybody has not seen Pump and Iron, get it on Netflix. It is one of the best documentaries ever. After the Last Dance.
Oh, unbelievable.
I went and bought Air Jordans. And a PSG tracksuit. They're sponsored by Air Jordan. That's my love for them. Right. So another thing, main muscle connection. So this is super important. The more that we exercise, the more that we train, the more connected we are to what we do muscle wise, and the better we have in terms of feel of how the muscle is working and so forth. Now, this is something that our clients don't really usually experience because they have no clue of what should be happening or what's going on or what should be firing, what shouldn't. And there's a very important sort of hierarchy. Well, one not being preceding others, but like in terms of important, it's all important. So think and intent. Does anybody follow Trained by JP, Jordan Peters? No.
I do. Is it the massive boy?
Yeah.
Huge. I follow my
The
strong
only reason
boy.
why, the only reason why I say that is, Owen, do you see how much he tries to psych himself up for a set?
He's like proper on the zone, like.
Yeah, and that's what when I'm talking about intent and I'm talking about thinking, that's what I'm trying to get across. It's like a lot of people, what they miss with their exercise is, what are you going in to do? Like, what do you want to achieve in this session? Right? And a lot of people don't think like that. General pop definitely don't think like that. They're just like, I'm just here to, burn some calories and lose some weight. But as an athlete, it's that thought process of what do I want to get out of this session, and getting in the frame of mind to get you there. Michael Jordan said it, I think it was on episode 7 or episode 8. where he was like, listen, he says, I pushed people, but I would never get them to do anything that I didn't want to do. And he was always talking about, like, you know, wanting to be the best. And if you just watch the docuseries, anytime anybody won an MVP in, you know, the NBA that wasn't him, he was like, fuck that, I'm going to prove them the best player on this. You know, so his intent, his focus, everything was just like insane. And that's why I try and get across to people, especially people who are hardcore trainers, is what do you want to get out of that session? What do you want to get out of that set? And the guy, Jordan Peters, is just like, you know, I want fucking 12 reps out of this set. I'm going to push myself until, you know, I near die. UFC the other week, just engage it. A lot of people now are saying, like, listen, I am prepared to die to win this fight. You know, there's an intent, there's a focus, there's a, you know, a rush there. Then obviously we have the mechanics. So mechanics of making sure you know what way the muscle functions so that you can get the most out of it. You can create that, like, most amount of tension. And then what we want to do is contract the muscle, make sure the muscle's firing, and initiate the muscle in terms of how it moves. And so the perfect example I always give to people is anytime I probably did it on a few U's, whenever we were doing just a flat dumbbell press, I usually told a lot of people to stop about 90 degrees, right? And people were like, why don't you go right down to the bottom? I said, you go right down to the bottom, you usually find that it's a bit like squatting. You come down, chest, 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 bounce, chest switches off because of the stretch reflex on the delt, and then it comes to a certain point, and then the chest and front delts kick in again, right? So the reason why I get people to stop here is because I know that they can initiate the movement out with the pecs, and they can control that. And then what we're going to do is, over time, we're going to actually lower this down, and we're going to be able to control the whole movement. So think of it like the way David talked about FRC in terms of control as well. We're doing that with bodybuilding, physique, or, you know, even exercise to a degree. You're trying to control that whole movement for different reasons. One is for mobility in terms of FRC. Another one is for, you know, maybe muscular development or strength development. But initiating the movement from the muscle or what you want to get from it. Another perfect example would be, you go to deadlift. What do you tell people to do? Try and bend the bar so you activate and initiate your lats and your triceps. Okay, making sure they're fire, contract. Then obviously we're creating tension. We execute the movement, and then what we're trying to do throughout the whole movement is maintain that tension. Okay, so the perfect example is, if you remember us doing those squats with our heels elevated, pushing the knees or pushing the ankles out, pushing through the big toe, slowly coming down, not dropping into the hole, initiating out by pushing the knees out, pushing the toes up, not locking it at the top. If you remember that, you'll remember how fucking sore it was. So imagine trying to do that for 10 reps. Now imagine trying to do that with load on your back, right? So getting the tension and keeping the tension is something different as well. And then something you can't see because it's here. Can we all still see this? Yeah. Repeat the shit out of it. Okay. So all those things, every single set. And I know sometimes I tell people this, they're like, fuck me, it's an awful lot to do with, like, just thinking about an exercise. But when we go into actually the research, it shows that you get more out of your muscle when you exercise intent and thought process of what you're actually doing in that session. Okay, so focus on the muscle you're training leads to more muscle growth. So if we look at bicep thickness, this was a study done by Brad Schoenfeld in 2018. You can see at the bottom, differential effects of attentional focus strategies during long-term resistance training. So before they did a movement, you know, an internal focus, thinking about, you know, training their bicep thickness was about 39 mils. After their actual movement, bicep curls, whatever it was, obviously the thickness went up to about 45. And then external focus, so basically people before they lift the weight, and then obviously post after they lift the weight in terms of what that is. So you've got 40 and maybe potentially 42. So focus on the muscle you're training leads to more muscle growth. Okay, so you're almost trying to signal to your body, this is, you know, what I'm trying to do. And it's a bit like anything, where focus goes, money flows, which we say in business. Okay, where attention goes, money flows. So if your focus is on purely on, you know, getting stronger and really thinking about your movement and where your shoulder should be, and, you know, what should be working and what shouldn't be working, you're obviously going to have, you know, better results. And then obviously, Marty, we were asking earlier, progressive overload, very, very simple, is essentially trying to lift more each session. Now, we know that can't happen because there is a ceiling to our strength and our adaptive capabilities. And we have a genetic, you know, ceiling that we're trying to overcome as well. So we got to be smart. But for progressive overload, trying to actually do more volume, more sets, more reps, or more weight is essentially what we're looking to do over, you know, a period of time. So it's as simple as that Melo story. You know, you're lifting something slightly heavier every single, not every single day, but every single session, so that you can, you know, improve and get better. And then, as it says here, for training adaptation to occur, we must overload it to disturb equilibrium. So our body is always in a homeostatic place. It wants to be on this nice line. It doesn't like to be in a surplus. It doesn't like to be starved up or down. And to build muscle, you must train hard. This will inevitably cause the body to adapt and build bigger muscle tissue. Once an overload has been presented to the body, along with adequate rest, nutrition, stuff like that, it should adapt. Okay, it's a term called super compensation. In simple terms, you must provide an overload. Therefore, you must continually lift more weight to ensure you are getting bigger and stronger. So that is just the very, very basic premise of it. The thing is, you know, you always hit that ceiling, that point. And I'm sure everyone here has experienced a point where, you know, you just can't get past, whether it's a certain weight or whatever it is. You take a couple of days off, and then, you know, you maybe build up for a week or two, or you go in and you're able to do that weight. You know, the proper rest recovery, nervous system recovery, all plays a role in that. And then you can sort of start lifting heavier and heavier again as well. So training volume, and volume in terms of its very, very simple form and what way it's written is volume equals sets times reps times weight. Okay, very, very simple. Sets times reps times weight. So if you can see here in example A, you have 8 sets of 3 at 100 kilos. Over that session, you have moved 2,400 kilos. Okay. Now, if we attribute that to either a, you know, a certain movement, imagine that's 8 sets of 3 on the bench press, right? So you've moved 2,400 kilos on that bench press, right? You could use it as a certain, what do you call it? Oh, I just want completely blank. You could say that I've moved 2,400 kilos doing hip hinges. So for example, I was doing, what was it the other day? 48 kilo swings, sets of 15 on the minute every minute for 5 minutes, 75 times 48. So there's 3,600 kilos that I've shifted in just 5 minutes, right? And then what I might do the next day is if I extend that minute to 6 minutes, then obviously I've increased the amount of volume that I do. So it's a very, very easy way to look at what you've done. What most people will do is, you know what, I did 4 reps that last week. I want to try and do 5 of it, of the same weight. Now, the other way is if we train a different way, we can get the same amount of load moved, but we will get a completely different response. So you see here, the difference are 3 sets of 10 at 80 kilos, 2,400 kilos still move within that session, but obviously we know we're going to get a completely different response. So A will produce more strength and motor unit recruitment, while B will elicit higher metabolic adaptation, fatigue buffering, and then it's neural fatigue versus muscular fatigue. Has anybody heard of, not of the DUP, but heard of DUP, style training? No. So it stands for daily undulating periodization, which is pretty much waving the loads either per session or per week. So based on how you're feeling and stuff as well. So some of the bigger things that are coming up a lot more with wearable technology is the likes of heart rate variability, being able to, train your body in lower states of intensity or higher states of intensity. And then what will happen is if you think of doing like a max deadlift or a max squat, the next day you'll not be able to do another max deadlift or max squat. Your body is not muscularly sore, like your muscles aren't really aching. It's your nervous system's just sort of like taking a whack. And it's just like, whew, that took a lot out of me. When you talk about muscular fatigue, you're talking about like not, your legs not working after doing, supersets on lunges and leg extensions and, squats and leg curls and RDLs and everything else, where you physically, your muscles are just like fried. And I'm sure some of you have left a session just went, I can't move my arms or like my legs are killing me straight away. So there's a difference between that neural fatigue and that muscular fatigue. Joel Jameson from Bioforce, 8 weeks out, he has like a style of training which I was already doing, which I sort of figured out based on DUP. I used to have this program which was called Heavy, Light, Medium, and it was basically just waving loads. And for my general pop on a Monday, we did our strength day because usually that's when they ate all the shit at the weekend. So they had excess calories. And then what we would do is, say on a Wednesday, we would do the light day. Now the light day was not easy. The light day was supersets of 12 to 15 reps of exercises. So there was a good pump in there because I knew their body wasn't really physically sore. If they did 5 sets of 5, that's 25 reps. But if I do 4 sets of, 15 reps, I'm doing 60 repetitions. I'm actually doing more in, one pair of exercises than I did in my previous session. So the amount of reps and volume I do is obviously higher. And then the medium day was more a hypertrophy day. Or if I have someone who plays sport, a guy coming to mind, a friend of mine, Collie, who plays, has a very, very mental job where he does sleepovers and stuff as well, and he plays sport. I give him examples of a heavy day, a later pump day, and something more explosive. And then what we do is we fit those days around how he's feeling on said day. So if he comes in, he's like, listen, up all night, had an overnight, like I'm not going to go, okay, we're doing a strength day. I'm like, listen, let's get some activation work done. Let's get some conditioning done. Let's go lower loads and let's just get you sweating and get you moving. Because then he doesn't have to worry about, I'm not putting added stress on his nervous system. I'm just thinking, I know we can, use this as a way to get some shit done. Then he may come in and go, do you know what? I've had a couple of days off. I feel great. Right, let's go for our heavy day. Okay, so you're manipulating those based on how people are feeling and stuff as well. Okay, and their recovery. And in terms of training volume, did anybody get Small off junior squat cycle for their program? No. If you're familiar with it, it's a 4-week training block of training squatting 4 times a week. And it's very, very simple. Marty, if we want to look at progressive overload, Monday, you do 6 sets of 6 on the squat. Okay. So 6 sets of 6. How many reps is that? 36. Okay. On the Wednesday, you do 7 sets of 5. Okay. How many reps is that? 35. Okay. On the Friday, you do 8 sets of 4. How many reps is that?
32.
And on the Saturday, you do 10 sets of 3. So how many reps is that? 30. So in a very, very simple, linear way to think about it, you have you have one thing coming down, which is obviously the volume in terms of how many reps you're doing. And then the next thing that's coming up is obviously intensity. Okay, so one's going to be doing this, the other one's going to be doing that. Okay, so very, very simple. As the intensity is going up, usually volume will go down. Okay. And we can do that in a linear fashion, or we can do it you know, by waving loads and stuff as well. But if we look at volume and we have looked back at a bit like we do with nutrition, that all makes sense to people, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just if we're increasing intensity, usually volume will come down. I'll show you a little bit more on this in a second, Marty, when we talk about RPEs and stuff like that. But don't want that up. Oh. Is this working like that for? Sorry, folks. So when we go to the next one, and this comes from Eric Helms, Muscle and Strength, basically volume recommendations. Okay, do enough to progress, not as much as possible, and increase when plateaued if you're recovering well. The next part that we cover will cover the programming of volume and stuff like that there, and some example programs and how they're deconstructed. But as he was saying here, there's a minimum amount of volume you need to do. And the problem is, and something I talked about with the other group is, everyone's familiar with GVT, yeah, German volume training.
10 sets of 10.
10 sets of 10, yep.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever used it?
I've used it years ago, like, but don't really like it that
so
much.
Why did you do
it? Just a different training style. It was mostly like squat or bench press, or you know, like one compound movement. Like, you can't really lift heavy on it, obviously, because you're doing so many reps. Like.
Okay, so the volume is pretty high.
Very high volume, and you don't put much weight on it, to be honest, like, because you'd be so fatigued at the end.
So
you know what I mean?
But why did you just say, you know, I want to do GVT? Was it just your own exploration, or were you doing it for a specific reason?
I just read about it and just give it a go, really, see what it was about. It was supposed to be good for packing on muscle mass, as they said, like. But
did it get popular a lot of years ago, just all of a sudden, or was that just me? Or was everyone?
It's always been in and out. People will use it for what? A shock intensity, because the volume is so high. Like, you're doing 100 reps a session. Now, the thing is, what you're usually going to see is Monday, say chest. I'm just giving like an example. You know, chest and back. Wednesday, like the one that we give you slides on before, say shoulders and arms, or even just legs. And then the Friday, maybe, you know, legs and fucking arms or something, right? And a lot of the time, the way GVT started was, it started with only 7 reps, and then it built up to 10 reps. But people don't do that they go in and do 10 sets of 10, which is 100 reps, right? Now, a couple of different ways you can look at that is 10 sets of 10 at, you know, 50 kilos is what? 5,000 kilos moved. Yeah. So 5,000 kilos moved in that session, right? Now, what we're going to talk about is obviously frequency and how that has a better component. So you're thinking about doing 100 reps, and we talked about this with nutrition, right? You do 100 reps in a session, and if you've never done that sort of amount of volume, or nowhere near it, because maximal recoverable volume will all depend on where you are as a person, like in terms of how often you've trained, you know, how frequent you've trained that certain muscle group, how adapted you are to that movement and neural adaptation, all that sort of stuff. But basically what you're doing is you're digging yourself a huge hole, right? And in this hole, you have to recover. So you have to sleep, you have to eat, you have to make sure you get enough in there. And if we think of anything above this line is what we call muscle protein synthesis, right? Synthesizing of new muscle tissue, right? Anything below this is muscle protein breakdown, okay? Losing muscle tissue. So it's effectively what you're doing is you're creating this massive, massive catabolic response in the body. And we still need to get to this point of here. Like we need to get to here for us to transition over from that breakdown into muscle protein synthesis. So the next time that we train, that line's a little bit higher, right? So our body can tolerate that a little bit more. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So a huge amount of volume takes a lot longer to recover from. Depends on where you are, or where your client is, and how fit they are and active and so forth. So when we go into frequency here as well, like what we can do is a couple of things. We can look at, imagine instead of doing 10 sets of 10, we did 2 sessions of 5 sets of 10, right? Now we've got twice as much, you know, training for the muscle, which is going to increase muscle protein synthesis and signal that. We have less volume, which means we can recover from that a lot easier, rather than just going in and completely shocking our muscle. Now, both have a time and place, right? But for most people, it's like if you've been training for 3 days a week for like 6 months, do you know what? You either need to you need to train longer, or you need to do a 4th day. Like it's going to become a part where there's just not enough that you can get done in that session because it's easy, right? And like we were saying there with the volume, if you do too much, you beat yourself up, you're tired, you're sore, you're lethargic. And if you don't have those recovery mechanisms in there, then it's difficult for you to then get up for your next session, right? So for me, GVT is always used as what I call an overreaching strategy. You can overreach with your body for about a week or two. You know, most people will tell you if you're in the 90% lifts, like in terms of weights that you lift for longer than 2 weeks, the likelihood of you being injured is really fucking high because your nervous system is just not used to lifting loads so much. Now we know that GVT is completely different. It's more a volume-based approach, but you're probably getting as good, if not a better response from the 5 sets of 10 on both those days. And it comes down to the amount of volume you can do, recovery. And then the point that I want to make, like long story short, is the fact that we look at volume a bit like we look at our nutrition, right? We know that average person should be consuming 2,000 calories a week or a day. Over the course of the week, that's 14,000 calories. So whether you're doing this form of volume, 8 sets of 3 or 3 sets of 10, and you're looking at the load, you can look at it at different ways. You can look at it at the end of the week, how much load did I shift on A, body part, or B, a movement in terms of a hip hinge movement, a horizontal press movement, a vertical press movement, blah, blah, blah. And then you're looking at your session and going, okay, what do I want to achieve next week? Okay, so you can go, last week I did 8 sets of 3 at 100 kilos. You know, here's what's going to happen. I'm either going to do 8 sets of 3 at a heavier weight, which is going to increase the amount of kilos I move in that session, or you know, I can increase it even more and go down in repetitions, or I can, you know, increase the repetitions and go, do you know what, I was able to do those 8 sets of 3 pretty easy. It was only like an RPE 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 4 reps at that weight next week. Right? So there's ways that we can look at that, but the overall volume is what we're looking at. Are we getting better each week? And then when we go over to talk about the programs, we'll talk about that maximal recoverable volume and the minimal amount of volume and stuff as well. And as we said, we want to do the bare minimum. And this is the thing that I always tell people: when you're bulking, when you're trying to put on muscle and size, you do the bare minimum, right? The easiest way to put on weight: do less, eat more. The complete opposite of losing weight: do more, eat less, right? So why are these pricks who are bodybuilders who are going, I'm going to bulk here, are still doing drop sets, failure sets, intensity techniques, still training 7 days a week? It's like, okay, it's not going to help you. You want to be doing the minimum amount, and then you build that volume up. Okay, a bit like when we talked about that Vendler, he has that step approach where the intensity is increasing, then it deloads. It's going to be the same with bulking. If your average bodybuilder will do between 20 to 40 sets on legs per week when he's dieting, right? 20 to 40 sets per week on his legs, right? So that can be split across quads, calves, hamstrings, so forth. You do not want to be doing that amount of volume when you're trying to bulk, because you're doing the same amount of volume you're doing to get reps and to lose weight. So what you would do is you might strip it back and go, okay, do you know what? I'm going to do 10 sets on my legs this week. Next week, I might do 12 sets. Week after, I might do 14 sets. And you'll bring it down to give your body recovery, and then you'll slowly start building it up again. Okay, so that's where it's good to know certain training programs. You might go to someone, do you know what? We're going to do GVT for 2 weeks just as a blast. After those 2 weeks, we're going to strip that volume way back, and just get you, building those sets and reps up again, stuff like that. So frequency. This comes from Brad Schoenfeld. All work in one session is not equal to all work split across 6 sessions. Okay, so frequency is one of the biggest components. Like we were talking about there about the recovery mechanisms. Instead of doing GVT 10 sets of 10 on a Monday and being beat up for a week to train chest and arms again, why don't you train chest and arms twice that week and do 5 sets of 10? Now, you will be able to lift more weight doing 5 sets of 10 than you would 10 sets of 10. Okay, because to be able to maintain that weight for 10 sets, it's tougher. To do it for 5 sets, it's more manageable. Less recovery, makes it easier for us to then go and train the muscle again. Okay, so people automatically assume the frequency is how many days you train, but in fact, how often you train a muscle group. And the optimal or the minimum, and again, we'll talk about it in muscle and strength pyramids from Eric Helms, is the minimum to, grow a body part is twice a week. Okay, so minimum twice a week. If you want to train chest, train it twice a week, back twice a week. Okay. The thing is as well, if you are maybe trying to bring up a lagging part and you've stepped your way up, you've went from training it twice a week to maybe 3 times a week, there's a logical progression there. But imagine you're training your legs once a week and then you decide, do you know what? I'm going to do small off junior where you squat 4 times a week. I guarantee that will break you. Right? Your body's just not used to that amount of volume or repetitions on that body part. So there is stages that we can build it up. Another example is everyone thinks that they need to train a certain body part at least once a week. John Meadows talked about this before. He always had a weak back. Right? His back wasn't his best body part. His legs were good. And so what he did was he knew his legs were good. So what he did is he only trained his legs once every 2 weeks. And then he started putting the extra frequency into training his back. So he's more or less looking at a maintenance protocol. Maybe every 10 days or so, I'll do legs. But in between that, I'm trying to get as much sessions on my back as I possibly can. Okay. And it's a bit like what we go to talk about here when we talk about specificity. You'll see what I mean. It's on the doc. Like on the next slide.
PJ, see Dorian Yates, he was on Joe Rogan, and he only trained most of his career like upper lower. And most of all the people he was saying, like he said that's all you needed for bodybuilding wise. And he said everybody was obviously doing bro splits, one body part and just smash it. And he said he just went on. He just trained with really, really high intensity, but with less times per week. Whereas people were training about like overtraining. He just said he done upper lower, and then that was up. Just trained like an absolute Trojan warrior.
Yeah.
And he just the other 3 days was just nutrition and rest. That's it.
He was always known.
He was massive.
Yeah, he was always known for like his blood and guts training program. It would always be a bit like the way Jordan Peters would train as well. Is like you have one working set, right? And people are like, "What do you mean one working set?" Is you work up to this one set, and that one set is your fucking best, most intense set that you could possibly do. And they're like, "Oh, you do one set of an exercise?" It's like, no, you're missing the point. You still warm up. Like, you know, all these, it's like a pyramid. You're pyramiding up to your, you know, if you're doing a set of 8, like you want that 8 to be a fucking absolute, like that last rep is, you know, almost tips you over the edge, like in type of intensity. Yeah. He was always known for that. And I like Dorian because he's smart. Like when he was on.
Very good podcast. It's a very good podcast. The one on Joe Rogan, he was really, really good, informative. Like
he's smart. He knew, you know, like he didn't attribute how he looked to his personality. That's what he was talking about. So a lot of bodybuilders are like, when they stop competing, that's all they've known. And you know, if any of us watched that video that John Berardi that Lenny sent in, what I loved was, like, I didn't know he'd sold Precision Nutrition in 2017, and the fact of he needed something to do, or else he would get up and do the same thing he did every day, like drive to work, do the same work. So he needed something out of the norm. And the good thing is, his life isn't defined by, you know, his work. And the same with, you know, Dorian Yates. All right, he was Mr. Olympia multiple times. The first guy probably to use insulin, and he's one of the first mass monsters. But like whereas he hanging out in huts, fucking taking psychedelics. But if we go back here, like I was saying, specificity. This is obviously my arms on Lenny's calves. Like the example goes, if you're training arms and that's all you're training, guess what's going to fucking develop? Your arms. You know what I mean? So it goes back into that frequency. If you want bigger arms, you need to train your arms more frequently. Arms are something that get cross-trained as well between heavy pulls and pushes and stuff like that. And we'll talk about that in the next section. But all that stuff has a crossover effect. So the evidence-based research is showing that splitting the volume over a week for volume has a better hypertrophic response. But again, like, what's one of the things you're going to encounter if you're training a general pop clan in relation to frequency?
They can only train maybe 2 or 3 times a week.
Bingo. They can only train a couple of times a week, and they're not willing, or they don't have enough time to do more. So would you do a GVT with them? Probably. You could probably do it because, I don't think general pop train hard enough, and they need, like, we're all about movement and making sure people are doing things right and stuff as well. But what we learned over the 10 years we've been doing this, we started off like every other trainer, just beasting people, right? Just getting, sweat on. Then we learned so much about movement and how to improve people's movement and mobility and so forth, that what was happening was we were doing a lot of mobility, a lot of warm-up sets, making sure things were activated, fired up. And then people weren't losing weight as quick. And then they're like, I came here to lose weight. So you almost need to find that balance between knowing how to improve someone, but also get them results. And sometimes I think people just need to be fucking beasted. Like, some people just need to sweat to get, the pounds off. And like we spoke about nutrition wise, everyone, you can only build loyalty and trust by getting people results. And sometimes you might have to swallow your pride and go, do you know what? I'm going to fucking make this bitch, run and do sprints on the weekend and do more than I would necessarily say, and make sure she does 15,000 steps and like really go overboard for the first month. Because when she loses weight, she is going to trust you. And then it's when that person trusts you is when you can start to turn it into a lifestyle. Okay, so it's a bit like we always talk about in terms of giving value. Someone has given you value by giving you monetary money. They've given you a monetary value. They've said, listen, I'm paying you to give me X result. And when you get that result, you go up in their estimations. So sometimes you need to look at it as well as, I'm going to mess this person up. Now, I'll always say, if you are going to do that, make sure the risk reward is not too high. And people go to me, what do you mean? I was like, I explain our, coaching sessions in the gym is a bit like CrossFit, but it's CrossFit with a bit of intelligence. And people are like, what do you mean? I was like, if you have dodgy shoulders, I'm not going to make you barbell snatch. I'm not going to make you overhead squat. That's just stupidity. The likelihood of you injuring yourself is really fucking high doing them exercises. The likelihood of you doing interval work on the assault bike and injuring yourself, very, very low. So I can still mess them up while keeping the risk factor really low as well. So like I said, if you're general pop, then we train a couple of days a week. Beast them, push them hard, get as much as you can. For yourselves, if you can increase the frequency throughout the week, you'll notice a massive difference.
All right,
Okay?
Pete. Did you mess them up obviously more towards the end of the session?
Yeah, obviously, like we were saying, I want to get good quality work in, strength ways, and then as we're going down towards the end of the session, like for us, general pop and how we train them, the first half is based around movement, mobility, and strength. Second half is based around, conditioning based stuff, higher reps, higher volume, metcons, stuff like that, metabolic conditioning sessions. I think it just works well for most people.
That's sorry, that's basically the way the practicals laid out now.
Yeah, more or less. You do your strength component. It's pretty basic. You do the heaviest compound movements first while you're at your freshest, and then you work your way down. If you look at it as CrossFit or you look at it as Olympic lifting, you do your skill-based work first while you're fresh. So if you're doing Olympic lifting, you do your snatch, you do your clean jerk first, and then you'll do front squats or back squats and pendlay rows and different things. You do the thing that you need to do at your freshest. Now, that can change sometimes. Like you can do pre-activation drills. Like I know my coach, before we squat, we may do pre-activation in terms of some split squats and some box jumps. And then I go in and squat, right? So I've already got a pump on the legs. Sometimes I feel better doing that than I do just going straight in squatting. But yeah, that's the way the practical will be laid out. You'll always do that bigger compounds and you'll work your way down. That's the easiest way to think of something. But that's the basic premise of programming, and then you can build upon that. Good. Okay, so intensity, and we're looking here intensity in terms of percentage of 1 RM. Obviously, we can do it in terms of volume as well, but percentage of 1 RM, your 1 RM, obviously you can only do 1 rep. 95%, you can probably roughly do about 2 reps. 90, you can do maybe 3 to 4 reps. 85, you can do 5 to 6 reps. 80, you can do 7 to 8 reps. 75, you can do 9 to 10. 70, you can do 11 to 12. The reason why I like this is when you get a new client in and they're like, oh, I've trained before. Yeah. Okay, well, what's your 1 RM on a bench? Oh, I don't know. Okay, right. So what do you usually lift? Well, I usually do like 70 kilos for 12 reps. So then rough estimation that their 1 RM may be around about 100 kilos. You can use an online calculator and so forth to work that shit out. But an eyeball or a nuance that they've given you information ways, and you can start to go, fuck, if you can do 11 to 12 reps, you're probably in around about 70%. So you can start to gauge that. The other thing is RPE, rate of perceived exertion, which we'll talk about in the next slide, is important because then it's feedback from the client to you, and whether you're doing daily undulating training with people or whether you're just going on how that client's performing. Mary has been up all night because her kids have been sick, so like she's not feeling the best. So obviously I need to adjust the session for. The bottom chart in the black is called the Prilipin chart, and it was developed, I can't remember, it was years ago, based on Olympic lifting, and now it's been adopted for powerlifting and different things. So basically what they found out, what is the optimal amount of sets and reps based on a percentage. So you've got 70% or below, you're talking about 3 to 6 reps per set. Optimal range being about 24 reps, anywhere between 18 to 30 is good. 70 to 80%, 3 to 6 sets again, doing anywhere in between 18 reps. Or obviously anywhere between 12 to 14, optimal being 18. When you're getting a higher percentage, like you're lifting heavier weight, you don't want to do as much volume. So that's why you're only doing 2 to 4 sets at the 80-90%. In around 10 to 20 reps, 15 probably being the best. And then obviously when you're at the 90 plus, you don't want to do a huge amount of reps and sets. You want to be anywhere between 4 to 10 reps, 7 being the optimal. A perfect example is I have my own bias on strength training, right? I have a very, very simplistic approach to strength training. My partner, she's just away, she'll tell you because I program for her. I pretty much always do 3 sets of 5, which is how many reps? 15.
15.
Yep. So if she's doing 3 sets of 5, then the next week I might do 4 fours. Right. So 4 fours, again, she can lift a little bit heavier. It's a little bit more volume. 5 threes, again, is 15 reps, but I can increase the volume. And then I may do 5 sets of 2, which is 10 reps. And then I like to do, very, very rarely do singles. If I do singles, it's usually in clusters. I think clusters are amazing. So a lot of the times I'll program for her 3 sets of 5, 4 fours, 5 threes, 5 sets of 2.
Is that 4 weeks? So week 1,
Yeah.
week 2, week 3, week 4?
Well, it depends on, I might do a couple of weeks of one and then I'll move on to another part. But yeah, you could read it like that on as well. The reason why I have such little amount of volume is because we're getting more work done within the session as well. So as you said earlier, if you do 5 sets of 5 heavy, the amount of time it takes you to do the set, the amount of time it takes you to recover from the set, and the amount of sets you need to get done, that's half your session, if not 40 minutes of your session gone. Do you know what I mean? So, like for her, she this year only competed in a powerlifting competition. She's competing in CrossFit as well. So, we came off a powerlifting competition. She was going to do a CrossFit competition. So she won her powerlifting rookie, right? Basically won her squat on her first fucking lift. Nobody came near. And we never trained exclusively. Well, we did the last couple of weeks for powerlifting, but the only reason why was like I train her for strength all the time. I train her to get stronger all the time. And we look at where she's weak in movements or where she can improve. So then when we had, I think, 4 weeks turnaround before the CrossFit comp. Obviously it was cancelled because of, I think it was 6 weeks because of COVID. But if I look at what she needs to do at a CrossFit competition day, strength isn't the main, barrier for people on a CrossFit competition day. She's just come off a powerlifting competition, so we know she's strong. So what way do you think I would program her?
Muscle endurance, maybe?
Yeah, bingo. Higher rep, higher volume, work to rest ratios. Like, so the style of training that I train her differs based on what she's doing. Where when we were powerlifting, we were doing slower endurance stuff. I only allowed her to do CrossFit once a week when we were doing powerlifting, where now we increase it. And then for the CrossFit stuff, I do a lot of skill-based stuff with her. She needs to improve her clean, she needs to improve her snatch and stuff like that. So we do, drills of that, and then we practice. And she's been hitting PBs week by week. So I do a low amount of volume. Olympic lifting is such a high motor unit, high threshold, high nervous system and neuromuscular demanding movements that most Olympic lifts will be like 3 sets of 3, 5 sets of 2, stuff like that. Hello. It very rarely goes to 4 or 5 reps if you're doing clean and jerk and snatch and stuff as well. So we're looking at rep ranges coming down, intensity going up, and making sure we don't break people. And then if it's general pop, I don't want to waste my whole session lifting heavy weights, because they're going to be sitting around like waiting ages between sets. And most general pop want to lose weight and they don't want that. So it's good to have these so you can sort of know programming ways. Like I said about the small up juniors, 6'6s, 7'5s, 8'4s, 10'3s. You can see the pattern of those going down and the intensity going up. And then obviously rate of perceived exertion. 2 things we have as coaches, our coach's eye in terms of how it looks, and obviously the feedback that we get from the client. For me, I have to rely on this because I'm training people online at this moment in time, and I'm going, how was that session? How did it feel? Rated out of 10 maybe, and I have to go with what they say. We're usually, if I was training Joe, and say we do 10 reps on a shoulder press, and by the end he was like, oh, that was like a 9, but the 10 reps looked easy, and be like, Joe, fucking land to me, that looked easy. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm the one who makes the final decision based on the feedback and the information you give me. And then the RPE, again, it's good to have whenever you're writing programs. So usually I used to have my Prilepin chart and RPE chart, and when I was writing a program, I'd be like, do you know what? If I'm doing a percentage-based model, this person at 80%, their 1RM's 100, they should be able to do 4 reps or 5 reps at 80. So I had a general inkling already, and then obviously we adapt and tweak as we go along. So for 1 to 4, and the RP means very late, probably too late. 5 to 6, you could probably do another 4 to 6 reps. 7 could maybe do another 3 reps, and these are all good clean reps. 7.5 could maybe do 2 at a chance, maybe 3. 8 could be doing 2 more. 8.5, you could do 1, maybe a chance of 2, same. And then 10 is, we never really want to do a 10 in training. Specificity.
What would be the difference? We used to see at uni, we used to use the Borg scale. That was out of 20. Is this just another version of it?
Well, yeah. And yeah and no. It is another scale for intensity, but Borg scale is based on cardiovascular. So the reason why it's
we would always use it in the VO2 max.
Yeah.
For
general pop, they don't understand what it is. It's very, very simple just to say to someone on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like absolutely could not do any more. How did that feel? So it's just a better way. We always tell the students at Elite, like we obviously teach the Borg scale, but we'll always be like, do you know what? Best thing to do is, I'm just going to use the Borg scale here on between 6 to 10, but for ease, do you mind if I use between or 6 to 20? But for ease, do you mind if I use 1 to 10? And most people are like, yeah. It is just another scale, but it's based on repetitions and effort rather than cardiovascular fitness. Obviously, specificity. In order to define hypertrophy, you must define specificity, set principle, specific adaptations to impose demands, train a muscle frequently, and the way you want it is going to result in that muscle growing because you've done so much work on it. Okay, so like I said, this dude's been training his arms, but he hasn't been training his calves or his legs. So I call this the Magaluf man. And you see it across the board. Oh, I just can't get my calves to grow. And it's like, do you train them as much as you train your arms? No. Well, then there's probably a reason. Okay, as well. And then obviously arms like calves get a lot of crossover because they're working every single day. Time under tension. So there is an optimal amount of time under tension for us to, move a weight explosively or to elicit muscle growth. So we've got 1 to 6 rep range, and a lot of the time you're going to move the weight as quick as possible. So that's probably going to be within 4 to 20 seconds. So if you can see there on the right hand side, 1 rep should take anywhere between 4 to 20 seconds. 2 reps, maybe 2 to 10 seconds. 3 reps, 2 to 6 seconds. 4 reps, 2 to 5 seconds. 5 reps, 2 to 4. Like muscle growth, if you're talking about, 6 to 12 reps. If you're doing 6 reps, then your tempo needs to be, anywhere between 7 to 10 reps for that, or 7 to 10 seconds per exercise to get into that 40 to 60 second rep range. Perfect example would be, imagine I'm doing 10 reps of a movement, right? And I want to have at least, 40 plus seconds of time under tension. I might look at it, I don't know if some of you asked a tempo question before. Imagine I'm doing a bench press. So on the bench press, 2 seconds on the way down, so I rate it as 2 in terms of the eccentric. Explode, axe, pause for 2 seconds, or pause for maybe 1 second, and then 2 seconds on the way down again. So I'm looking at potentially maybe 4 seconds per repetition. Does that make sense? 1, 2, explode up, probably going to take about a second, pause for a second, coming back down. So that's probably taking me 4 seconds a rep. 10 reps of those is going to get me within that optimal time under tension of 40 to 60 seconds. Okay, that makes sense? Okay, so it's just basically the more reps you do, the time frame of, to get the optimal time under tension is. And then muscular endurance is obviously a lot longer. Failure training. So failure training, as we see both of it, you usually see this in the gym, the top dude who's failing on one arm, and then what I call proper failure training, where you're completely fatigued, you have a good training partner who's assisting you to make sure that you maintain your form while overreaching, essentially. So muscle growth only takes place when stress is imposed upon it beyond its current capacity. Training to failure has shown amazing benefits when used in a well-designed program, and training to failure all the time is very taxing on the nervous system, which could cause overtraining and reversibility, loss of gains. And this is what we're going to talk about here in this last slide. So with each training session, both fitness and fatigue go up, okay? But when the latter dissipates, this will prompt a rise in performance. Okay, so over a larger time frame, if progressive overload is continually applied, the performance curve will continue in a linear fashion. Okay, so that is the fitness line that we're talking about. Well, ideally that is, but of course things aren't always made that simple. So I want you to look at yellow, look at performance, okay? Notice how it goes down. Yeah, everybody see that? That is after your training session, right? So after your training session, performance is down. But what has happened to fatigue? Fatigue has went up. Right? So performance has come down, fatigue has went up. Now, if we provide enough optimal recovery, then what happens is we are technically stronger in our next session and fatigue diminishes. But the same thing will happen again. We go in, we train, we get fatigued, performance decreases and so forth. But all the time, this linear fashion on the blue line, the fitness is improving constantly because you're giving yourself adequate rest, recovery while pushing your body. And obviously you're dealing with fatigue. So these are the 3 things that you're obviously looking at all the time. How much can I lift? Can I lift more? Can I run faster? Are my splits better? You know that fatigue's going to go up. Can I manage that fatigue better? And then overall that fitness should be improving time after time. Okay? Any questions about that, folks? No?
No.
This is pretty much more just the technical side. We'll go into a little bit more basic muscle functions, programming, stuff like that. The next session we do, I don't know if I think I'm taking it in the weekend, so we'll go through the rest of this stuff at the weekend. But any other questions about it, let me know. A lot of the time it's a bit of a head melt because it's all theory, but hopefully it's give you a bit of insight into hypertrophy or hypertrophy. If anybody says hypertrophy in the gym, slap them. It sounds American. Hypertrophy. Cool, folks. That's us for tonight. I don't want to go over and shoot too far because it'll take a wee bit longer, but I can share these slides and stuff in whenever we're finished it. But if you do have any questions, I'll pop the video in the link as well if anything does come just hit me up. Let me know.
Can I ask a quick
Cool.
question, PJ, before you go?
Go ahead on.
You see, just for our practical, will we be giving a client, or can we bring our own now because that, you know, you can meet people outside your high school now? Are we allowed to use your client or not?
I don't see any reason why not. Obviously speak to Lenny, but
Yeah, we are, as long as
got-
you maintain social distance.
yeah.
you're allowed to use your client then, because of the news the other day that you're allowed to meet people now outside your house, or?
Yeah, like I said, I'd confirm it with Lenny. I see no reason why. Like we were talking about this before with our coaches. The good thing about this thing is that we can't touch people. Like we can't be hands-on with clients whenever, because we're going to start doing outdoor sessions again here and in the gym.
Yeah.
But what
100%.
it does as a coach, for you as a coach, is it improves your, descriptive, talk in terms of what way you explain an exercise, what way you get someone to do it. So it will be an added bonus, because then if you can just explain to someone and make it sound so easy that they just get it, it's going to make you a better coach. So.
Oh, that's brilliant.
But,
I'll shoot him a text. I know him, and just to make sure. But that's all I wanted to ask.
Like I said, I don't see any reason why, unless he maybe just wants to keep everybody contained. So, like, if at least one of us have it, we're not giving it to everybody else. I'm going to start shooting you with the temperature gun when you come in. Yeah.
No, that's fine then.
I know, I'm not here. But wouldn't it be brilliant if you were shaking yourself at a practical and you just you were sweating, and then I shoot you with a gun? It's like, listen, you might have COVID, you can't do your practical, and you're like, yeah. Or just start running, get a sweat on, go, I think I can do this. Right, folks. So I'll see you at the weekend. I'll confirm with Len, but I think he has to do an FLRC weekend, I think. But anyway, any questions, just hit me up with it, and I'll stick the recording in when we're finished.
That's brilliant. Cheers.
No
Thank you.
worries.
Brilliant,
Cheers.
thank you.
Thanks, man. Good luck.
Cheers. Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.